All right, Ryan, what is on your radar today?
Well, I wanted to highlight one of my favorite Twitter exchanges from last week in response to the news that Elon Musk would be buying Twitter. It was started by reporter Jacob Silverman, who said this. He said, "What's to stop Musk from tasking an engineer on day one with searching through the Twitter DMs, which aren't encrypted or ephemeral, of politicians, journalists, and critics?" And so Matt Iglesias responded, and it looks like he thought he had Jacob caught in some political hypocrisy, all of a sudden concerned about privacy only because Musk was going to be in charge. Iglesias said, "Was anything stopping the previous set of executives?" Well, Jacob responded to that and said, "Well, in fact, he has been on this story for quite a while." And he said, "No, which is why a Saudi spy ring was able to successfully operate within Twitter, unmasking dissidents in the process, and then got away with it." And so Jacob had written a story for the New Republic about exactly 1 year ago about precisely this phenomenon, which is that Saudi Arabia, which is one of the biggest investors in Twitter, had twice, at least twice, been infected by a spy ring, which was accessing Twitter DMs privately of dissidents, and then using that information to unmask people, arrest them, torture them, and according to Ali Al-Ahmed, who is not a friend of the show, but should be. We should have him on more, a Saudi dissident. He's suing Twitter. He claims that people that he was in contact with were abducted and have been disappeared. And there's every reason to believe that Ali Al-Ahmed has a lot of credibility on this question. One of the Twitter spies, Ali Al-Zabara, was on the FBI's most wanted list. This is this is not a conspiracy theory that is just being kicked around. This is actual Saudi policy that was put into effect and was busted by the feds. But despite being busted, they have continued having this type of access. One reason for that is that they are such big owners of Twitter. Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, was something like a 9% owner of Twitter. He was famously kind of rounded up at the Ritz-Carlton back in 2017, and there are a lot of rumors that Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, actually now, as a result of that, controls his voting shares. People have said that MBS controls more voting shares than Jack Dorsey does, and so what this does is it raises a question for Elon Musk. If he's concerned about freedom, if he's really buying Twitter to push back against authoritarians, is this something he's going to address? Because it hasn't been addressed yet. And Jacob Silverman concluded his piece pretty succinctly. I want to just read that. He wrote, "More than 5 years have passed since the FBI told Twitter it had a Saudi spy problem. The company has since promised tightened procedures and access controls, but for many dissidents, it's too late. Put another way, a murderous autocratic government abused its close relationship with Twitter to cultivate spies who provided information that then got innocent people thrown in jail. That government remains one of Twitter's largest outside shareholders and continues to harass and monitor its citizens via the microblogging service." Now, of course, Saudi Arabia isn't the only autocratic country, and it's not, in fact, the only democratic country that would like this type of access to Twitter DMs to unmask critics. China, of course, would love to be able to figure out, who it is that is questioning governmental policy, whether it's within China or, importantly, outside of China, because China has been known to go into other countries and rendition people, back to China, the way that the United States has done during the global war on terror. And of course, the U.S. too. The U.S. has worked with big tech, as we know from Edward Snowden, in order to have backdoors into different platforms. What they've been deeply frustrated by is apps like Signal that are encrypted end to end and don't even allow people within the company access to them. And so the U.S. also would love to have this type of access. And so it's one thing to have a billionaire who controls Twitter, if that billionaire is genuinely free of outside influence. But we don't know exactly who has leverage, literal leverage, lending leverage over Musk. There's a lot of reports that tens of billions may have come from Chinese sources. We know that Musk is heavily dependent on U.S. government contracts for his other businesses, U.S. government and U.S. government subsidies. He's dependent on government subsidies all over the world. And so if those governments come to him and say, hey, we'd like a little bit of access here, what is Musk going to say under pressure? And so to me, if he wants to send a serious signal, he should hands off, tell his engineering team to make, number one on the roadmap, the end-to-end encryption of direct messages that make it so that even people within Twitter cannot access them, so that when a government comes to Musk and says, hey, remember how we lent you $20 billion for that company? We'd love to know who's running this account and where their location is. That Musk can say, well, I don't know, because we've designed it so that I can't know. If Musk doesn't do that, then he's not serious about freedom. I don't know, Emily, do you think that this is something that Musk is actually going to look at, or do you think that he just wants to kind of do Twitter polls and allow kind of fringy people back onto the site?
No, I think he's probably very serious about this, because I think it's the type of thing that users want. And as a sort of businessman, he would understand that. But this is one of the big problems with surveillance capitalism, right? Is that you have these massive, massive amounts of data in the hands, or that can basically be bought by people who are extremely wealthy and necessarily then have all of these different geopolitical connections. You already raised the issue of China, and the point of the Saudi story is a really, really good one. But I think what you're hitting at is something that's even broader than Twitter. It's the entire business model that our economy is now sort of predicated on, is snapping up all of our data, our communications, and putting them in private hands with no safeguards like encryption. And so I do think Elon Musk, because he's sort of very much, I don't know the right word, but he understands, I think, the consumer better than a lot of people in Silicon Valley certainly do, and especially than a lot of people in the media do. And so I think he knows how important that is. But I do agree with you, Ryan, that this is a good test, because there's basically no reason not to do this at this point. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know what kind of manpower and sort of financial resources it would take. I don't know how difficult it would be. And Twitter is not an exceptionally well-run company. They have 7,000 plus employees. He's going to have to, I'm sure he's going to be making cuts, and reports indicate as much. So I know that he's going to be doing a lot, but this should absolutely be a priority, and we'll know soon enough whether it is.
Right, he probably won't have to make cuts. He'll probably lose a ton of engineers and other staff, and so then can probably just backfill at that point. And just so people understand, one of the ways that this works, so Ali Al-Ahmed he's suing Twitter right now, saying that they negligently allowed Saudi Arabia to hack into his account, and it wasn't that. Now he's in no way completely safe, even though he lives in suburban Washington, but he's pretty safe. Like if as long as he doesn't leave the United States, Saudi Arabia hasn't gotten to the point where they're going after physically going after people on U.S. soil, except there's a case in California that's of a Saudi citizen, but that's kind of a wild card at this point. What they would do when they hacked him wasn't going after him. They were trying to figure out who was communicating with him. Mm-hmm. And this is an old kind of intelligence technique. You find somebody who's a well-known dissident, and so as people are getting involved in the periphery of dissident activity, a lot of them would reach out to him kind of for guidance or for connections. And so instead of going after him, what they would do is they'd go after everybody that reached out to him. And like you said, this is not just Twitter. FBI does this. Let's say there's some extremist that they're surveilling. They'll watch that person's YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And then people who are commenting in that YouTube channel, they don't need a warrant for that. That's just public stuff. But they'll start surveilling every single person that commented there. And so, what Twitter needs to not do is not make Saudi Arabia's job any easier, given what their track record is on human rights.
Saudi Arabia or China, or as you said, any autocratic, right?
Or the United States. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Right. If the United States comes to Musk and says, we want to know who this person is, Musk needs to have the technical ability to say, I can't tell you. I don't know. Like, there's no way for me to tell you, because if you just leave it up to one person's kind of ethics and strength of character, let's pretend that he's the strongest moral character and has the most intense fiber that of anyone on the entire planet. There's so much power and pressure behind it that eventually, somebody's going to buckle, and you just start to say, what's worth more, preserving, my control of this thriving this company, what might not be thriving from a profit perspective, but it is from a cultural perspective, or this one person that I've never heard of. And it's very easy for you to rationalize away and sell people down the river into torture chambers.
Yeah, and I think there's an immense appetite among the public for safeguards like this on social media channels, Twitter, and down the line. And I assume Elon Musk understands that. So great point, Ryan. I think this is a good test. And that's a really important point.
All right, Elon, put it on the roadmap, get it done. And Emily, looking forward to what's on your radar.